Good morning, folks, and welcome. Glad to have you back with us. Just want to take a few moments on. I know that, and it always happens that there are a few who are stragglers and what have you. But the names that I have on the list are David Alston and Mary Rose Colburn, Gerald Giles, Brent Ham, Andrew Holm. No, Kathy's not doing it. Kathy Lasky, Robert LeBlanc, Nancy March, Paul Ranson, Paul Rideout, Amanda Taylor, and Gloria Wendover. Here in St. John's this morning, some of the people have their archdeaconry meeting, and so they will be viewing by video. And we also then have in the credit course on it Neil Buffett and Paulette Bugden and Ruby Carter, Charlene Lang, Jolene Peters, Kay Short, and James Spencer. So, and I have to check with one. I think I had him on the list, but it looks like it's not on that list, so I'll have to double check on that. So, welcome to you all, and those who are those who are viewing the recording. Welcome to you, and if you have any questions outside of what is addressed in my class or the discussions that come along with it, then you can certainly let me know. What we're going to do today is take a few moments now to have a look at the syllabus for the winter semester, and then we're going to take a little bit of time on supervision of pastoral practice. I sent a short article called 7 Rules for Pastoral Interns, and we'll plug that open and have a little bit of discussion on it. And then Bill Bartlett, the Reverend Bill Bartlett, United Church clergy and chaplain, now out of retirement, back as a part-time chaplain with the United Church, is going to be along with us to do some work on the topic of action reflection model in supervision for ministry. So that's what we're going to do. But before we do any of that, I want to take a moment to start us with a prayer. And this prayer is taken from Markrina Weidecker's book called Abide, Keeping Vigil with the Word of God. Beautiful little book. She's a Benedictine sister, but beautiful. Has a lot of those types of spiritual writings. But this one, this prayer she has, and I feel it's appropriate to what we'll be talking about today, because we'll focus a little bit on how you pass on the gift, really, of your own pastoral skills, how you pass on that gift to others. And so most times I think people in pastoral ministry are aware that the gifts they have are passed on in the ministries they perform with those to whom they minister. And that is indeed part of the giving of the gift. But today I want us to be aware that when you take a role to supervise someone, a trainee in ministry, whether it be a seminarian or a parishioner who is trying to improve their skills and their knowledge base for effective ministry, that is giving gift as well. And so this prayer I thought to be a bit appropriate to it. Let us pray. O gift-giving God, this I know to be true, all is gift. In your hands you hold age-old gifts that continue to flow into my life. Each gift bears the image of the giver. As I reach for these gifts, instill in me an awareness of the love with which you give. Inspire me to share with others the treasures you have poured into my life. For only then will your gift be a gift when given away. Teach me how to give and how to give away, how to receive, and how to surrender. Reveal to me both my icons and my idols. May I learn to live with open hands and open heart. So just take a moment now to check that people are with us for the with hearing and seeing clearly, what have you. I did a mic check and someone, Neil, earlier on, but if a few of you would let me know that you're hearing me and what have you.
It's all good here from Ruby.
Okay, good, Ruby. Great.
Hi, Rick. I can hear you, Charlene.
Good. Okay.
Gloria.
Hey, I'm fine as well.
Excellent. Great. So all's well. Welcome to you all. And I'll just take a moment now to try and bring up the Word document that I need. Oh, why did I close that? So the design of the course for the winter semester is pretty well the same as we had in the fall, both for the non-credit and the credit requirements. And thank you. Many people completed evaluations on the sessions in the fall, and it was much appreciated, and glad to be able to kind of stay with, for the most part, the pattern that we have. People commented having the availability of the recordings has made it convenient and doable for them, and that's good. And we'll continue to record and make them available fairly promptly. And I think that was appreciated as well, that they didn't have to wait too long in getting the PowerPoints out. The thing that many noted too was the good discussion, the opportunities to participate in discussion and engagement with so many others who are in ministry and have experience and thoughts and ideas shared by others, and the multiplicity of experiences that people have had. So I think generally speaking, that was the feedback, and so I appreciate that. One of the things that I have done this term is, for those who are doing the credit course, we've introduced a text. It's called Engage by Matthew Floating, and the title is A Theological Field Education Toolkit. And so it's actually broken out into 24 relatively short chapters. And so what we'll do this semester is the people who are doing credit course, this is how they will be evaluated. If you see it on the screen there, give you an idea. Those who are not doing it for credit, or doing it as non-credit, I should say, see now what you're missing out on. And so that's how the evaluation will be done. One of the pieces that I've introduced this term, and I think it'll make a better experience even for everyone, at least that's my hope, is that we will have the topics. I'll come to those in a few moments, but we're going to work through that book. And part of what we're going to do, or how we're going to work through it, is by having the chapters assigned to students who are doing this as a credit course to do short synopsis. I emphasize to all, short synopsis of the chapters, and so we'll work our way through it, and that should kind of add a little bit of interest there as well. Very interesting little book, and but we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I want to draw attention. You probably saw when the Reverend Bill Bartlett entered the room. Always great to have Bill, longtime colleague of mine. We've worked together in the healthcare system for many years, and Bill took on different roles with the Provincial Pastoral Care Association and with the United Church. But the thing that I suppose or one of the things that has allowed Bill to have most influence on pastoral care and quality of pastoral care has been his career and his involvement with Queen's College and with many other centres across Canada as a supervisor in clinical pastoral education. And as I said before Bill came, that will be part of what we will do today is have Bill talk a bit about a particular activity or a process that's a part of CPE. So for some of you, but many of you have done CPE. Some of you have probably done CPE with Bill. So it'll be a bit of a nice refresher and reunion as well. But the action reflection model is a skill set that can be helpful, I think, in what we're talking about in this course. So again, welcome to you all. So before we launch into doing a little bit of what I will do for the first part of the class, any questions or comments or anything anyone would like to address before we move on as we're launching off? Okay, I also want to mention and welcome and thank the Reverend Neil Kellett. I should say the Archdeacon Neil Kellett, but he's not a stickler about titles, you might notice. But Neil has been with us in this course and contributing. And actually in the evaluations it was noted, Neil, that your attendance and participation is very much appreciated. So many years of supervision and supervising students in their internships and so on has been wonderful to us, and now to be here as our chaplain. So
I sit at the feet of Gamaliel, now with us, who was the Reverend Bill Bartlett, who conducted the very first 3-day workshop for the supervisors in the 1980s here.
In the 1980s.
Yeah. The beginnings of reopening of the college, wasn't it? Yeah. Next year, that will be 40 years. Yeah. So we want to today, for the first part of the class, we're going to take a little bit of time on supervision of pastoral practices. So last time I used a short definition or description, I suppose is a better way to say it. Being trained in philosophy, we make a distinction between definitions and descriptions, but a pastoral practice refers to how an idea is applied or used when giving spiritual care or guidance. That usually occurs in pastoral ministry and pastoral care when leading someone closer to God, either in spiritual formation, teaching, counseling, or in liturgy. Of course, the term pastoral is rooted very much in our Judeo-Christian tradition. So it brings with it then what the role of pastor or the pastoral role is in relationships, in communities, and on teams as well. That's becoming more part of it, both pastoral teams as well as multidisciplinary teams. And someone tells me that they're only seeing us, not seeing the slides, so I'm sorry about that. Should be seeing them now. You seeing them now, Neil?
Yeah, they're back now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, and thanks for alerting me. So anytime we drift off, don't hesitate to make the comment and cut in fast. So some of the things, last time we listed some things about features and of pastoral practice, and I added some other things to the list. So we're not going to spend time in these classes talking about how to do these things. We're going to talk a bit about how to supervise, how to lead, how to pass on the gift of being able to do it. And we need to bog down. All of you are in this because you are seasoned in ministry, and you have, at this point in your career, by nudging of others, the Holy Spirit works that way. So don't think of of that as being any less noble than an obvious direct call to yourself. But the one way or another, you are here to kind of further discern and equip to be able to provide some supervision to those who are preparing for ministry in whatever context. So we're going to presume you have the skill set yourself, the gift for doing it. But as I drew out or tried to draw out in my little preamble to the prayer that I used before we started today, it's about discovering and passing on another gift, and that is through supervision. So these are some of the pastoral practices that are there. And these gifts for any individual are likely going to be influenced by a variety of things. The manual, whatever the manual might be, that could be handed to any student or trainee would not be able to do all that needs to be done to produce someone who is effective in pastoral ministry. And we know, of course, we've been blessed with occasions, all of us have, I'm sure, where we've met up with people who never had, one might say, a manual or a class or formal supervision, but they have the pastoral presence and they have the skill. So some of the factors that come to my mind, and then I'm going to ask you, all of you, to kind of add things that might come to my mind on things that influence how pastoral practice might be performed or delivered, or the effectiveness of one's pastoral practice. A charism comes to my mind first. There's some people who have the gift, and it comes natural to them. They've never stepped inside a theology school or a classroom to be trained or formed, but they just have it by instinct, charism. And it's wonderful then when those who have charism even take it a layer or two deeper with training. An example, the example of others, and of course this comes very much into what our venture in this course, and I suppose our whole reason for being, particularly the courses and programs in pastoral skills, are about being able to provide the training and the example and opportunity to practice the skill and to improve it. And like many things, particularly relationship-related endeavors, reflection on what we're doing is important. What we think of it ourselves and how we ponder it and how we kind of gaze upon it in consideration of other ways that we might do it or might have done it or would go about doing the same thing if we were to do it again. Of course, important in pastoral practice, especially when one starts to take on a formal role, is having occasional reviews. Sit down and review a chunk of time. What have I been doing for the last week, the last month, the last year? How have I been doing it? And I think as time goes on, as people get into more responsible pastoral roles, then part of it is trying to see how all of these things, so we're on that previous slide, it's on your screen there now, how all of these things interconnect. And how good of a job do I do in making smooth connection, making it whole and complete, or to have a type of an integrated pastoral ministry. That's part of it as well. And so sometimes it's worthwhile for any of us and all of us to kind of make sure that that on our own, but I think even of equal importance and maybe more, is to have that type of review with a colleague, a peer, a friend, or someone who can at least hear us give some explanation of how we bring all of this together, and maybe to be courageous enough to identify the one or two things that I don't feel confident about or competent about, or that I've been negligent at, or I just don't know or care anything about it. Because I guess one of the things I did leave from the list is one's personality. Some people, by their nature, they are very introverted, or they find it hard to take that step of reaching and going into the life of another, to engage in their narrative, we might say, to be there, to hear their story, and to be empathetic to it, and to be silently there. Sometimes it'd be make the effort, but if we hold ourselves in a position of authority or expert, it's kind of easier to do it if we're hearing someone else's story and responding to it as an expert or an evaluator or a critic, even, we might say. That is sometimes easier to do, usually actually easier to do, than just being present and a listener. But anyway, I'm going to shut up now, and finding that hard to believe, but I will for a few moments, as long as somebody else has something to say. And I'm going to ask, first of all, Neil or Bill, if one of you have anything to add. I know you have lots to add to the bit of stuff that I've put there, but comments on, don't contradict me.
No.
Bill, any thoughts of your own? You've been around this stuff so long, it's putting a bit of pressure on me now to be at this more than you here.
Your reference to personality and how, in connection with being introverted or extroverted, and understanding, how we operate out from our own body is really important. The person who is introverted, of course, takes time to think about things. Can be quite deliberate, but also when it comes to engaging sometimes in a context with a larger number of people, find it hard to move in there. And so, understanding yourself becomes really quite important. And in connection with supervision, that's one of the things that we start to do some work on, is the whole area of pastoral theology and clinical pastoral theology is based on the better that we know ourselves, the better we are to be with people and to do anything in life, including ministry. So in connection with supervision of people in ministry, to know as you supervise, it's really important to help people reflect on their own personality.
Yeah, and that aspect of being aware that I do it my way. I might write a song about that, so I think someone got it there before me. But it can be so tempting when you're supervising to try to create a mini-me, but it isn't effective, particularly when you have two who have different personalities. One of the things, and we'll probably take a few moments on it now after we further discuss this, but one of the things I'd like to go is that kind of instinct that we sometimes have, that there is a kind of a pastoral personality. And kind of have that notion that almost everyone in pastoral ministry, or people who are going to be good at it, have this kind of fit into this profile of personality. And that can be quite unfortunate in many ways to those who might have a calling, who by their personality type, or whatever way we would describe it, that isn't their way of being. The other thing is, of course, that it really is an unfortunate handicap on those who need the ministry, of those who probably aren't that typically outgoing and extroverted. Neil, any comments from yourself?
One of the things which I've always found in this role, that if I felt that I was in need, I would always consult somebody else who was also supervising at that time. And so that there was interaction going on, and you bounce off ideas between you. And I found that to be invaluable. And I found that particularly true in the very first occasion of supervision.
Mm.
Yeah. Because the nearest person wasn't anywhere near at all geographically.
Yeah.
But that didn't matter.
No.
Folks who are online, love to hear any of your thoughts or ideas on any of the matters that we've kind of threw out here today. Kay, I see you are putting a note up. I can read it if you want, or well, I'll do that because I can see you turn on your mic, so I'm glad to hear.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure. I just wanted to, expanding on what Reverend Barrett just said, I'm curious to wonder which would be considered a more practical or better fit when you're placing a student or a person with a supervisor. Is there more to be gained from being different, or do you think like-minded works better?
Interesting
Because
question.
I could see the issue of trying to create a mini-me being a concern. So
Yeah.
I think if we were able to create the situation which would have the greatest learning, it would be people who are different. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury often to be able to set that kind of, or have that happen, that you would have people who are opposite and learn from each other.
Yeah.
But in connection with being opposite, it's not just being opposite, is that people understand themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just opposite, then that doesn't help
Yeah.
very much.
I think what's more important than, and really following up on Kay's question and Bill's comments on it, is it isn't so much about being opposites or what have you, it's being aware
It's being aware.
and being respectful. And I mean, having this simple awareness that we have here, we're into right now, you know, this is part of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you know what? This is just as true when you're raising your children as it is when you're involved in training people for pastoral ministry.
Yes.
And I admit, as a parent, the temptation is often there, you know. Why did you do that? I'd never do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Others online, questions or comments or observations? I gotta admit now that when I hear students say questions or comments or observations, I know they're mocking me. It's kind of my line. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll push on a little bit from there into the next slide. Now this is going to be a bit hard to read. I don't know why I cram so much on there, because I try not to do that all the time. But anyway, can you read it on your screens, or is it too small?
too small.
Too small.
Yeah,
Okay.
too
What I'm
small.
going to do is I'm just going to go in, and I'm just going to take that slide, and I'm going to cut it into do a cut and paste on it, and make it into two. That's the difference in doing that stuff home.
Rick, are you going to send these out to us again?
Oh yeah, as I always do. Yeah.
Great.
And as you might say, I've done this before.
Well, I'm amazed that you're able to do it, right?
Because you think I'm so stupid I couldn't. Thanks, Bill.
No, it's that I'm so stupid I couldn't. I really couldn't.
Well, just hoping nothing goes wrong. That's usually when it does, when you start to feel a bit pumped that you're getting something done, and then all of a sudden Bill Gates pulls the plug on you. Anyway, there it is. Should be a bit clearer now.
Yeah.
Okay, gang? Okay. So by now you should be seeing a slide that's a bit bigger. So what I threw out there is the heading on it. What can a veteran do for a trainee? Well, I kind of broke it out into a few steps. Identify specific practice to focus on. Don't try to do everything at once. Things will come together later. So many people who are in more formal training types of things, such as if you're going out on an internship from Queen's College and what have you, there'll probably be things such as a learning covenant put in place at the start of the internship. But for the people who are preparing, for instance, for ministry in the Anglican Church of Canada, there's a very rich document. We had a look at it in our last session in the first semester on competencies for priesthood in the Anglican Church of Canada. And there's also the document from the Anglican Church of Canada on the Iona document on the diaconate. Those are great resources. And then trainees can identify their own needs, and you have experience. And that's very important to be able to identify for a trainee who mightn't realize that, you know what, you've got to be skilled when you're doing pastoral visitations, home visitations or visitations in hospitals, nursing homes or wherever. It's not just a drop in, having a chinwag kind of thing. A pastoral visit is different, and you've got to know how to do it. Okay? So your own experience. So that can be part of how you'll identify what pastoral practices, what skills the person will practice, and what ones that you want to give them training and supervision. So then what's good is to introduce the particular pastoral practice to them. Don't take it for granted that people know everything or anything. Explain why it is important and use examples and related pitfalls. Explain when, where, and how to use practice. Let's take, for example, visiting people in hospitals or nursing homes. And why pastoral skills and what pastoral skills are important there. Well, you can connect it to what you see and how important pastoral visitation is in light of what the role of the pastor is and what the congregation expects from a pastor, from a clergy in a parish, and that witness, that presence, that visiting the sick, as the gospel would call us to do. And you might tie it in then with how, you know, there are ways that it need to be done because you're going to be part of a bigger system. When you go through that door of the hospital or a nursing home, then you're in a bigger institution and there's pastoral care departments, there's things that, you know, so you got to be part of that as well. And you got to be respectful of the policies and processes that are in place, because they do, in fact, usually help people to do what they need to be able to do in pastoral ministry, though some gaze upon them as an obstacle. In fact, if those policies and procedures weren't there under the structures and formalities and all that are in healthcare organizations today, you would find it much more difficult to get access to visiting patients outside the range of what any friendly visitor would be allowed to do. So you'd use examples from your own experience, 2 or 3 maybe, that would make the point. And then related pitfalls. What happens if people aren't visited? And how, if you neglect it, what difference it makes to the person, what difference it makes to their family, what difference it makes in the parish, what difference it makes in your own credibility as a person in ministry and in a pastoral role. So those are part of, like, before you ever get into what exactly you would say and how you would go about it and what have you, those can be ways to do it. Now that can be done kind of as a didactic, instructional type or a conversational way of doing it, probably as you're driving from wherever to the hospital or to the home that you're going to visit. And some of what you would do is at least share your own experience on that type of ministry. On, when do you find is the best times to visit, and why do those times work, and why is it important to visit, and how to go about doing it. And then you move into the show and tell. You demonstrate the skill by probably doing a dry run. You might say, now, so imagine right now we're at the hospital, and we're there because a lady called us this morning to say that her husband had a stroke the day before yesterday. And he's really nervous, and he's frightened, and he can't talk very clearly. And so let's imagine that we're going in to visit him. And I can use this case, you might say to them, because about 3 weeks ago, that's something that I had to do. And so you'd say, so here's what I done. I went in and I signed in, did that, and I got to the room, and before I went to the room, I went to the nursing station and I told them who I was. They knew who I was because I had on the badge saying that I'm the. But anyway, I told them who I was to visit and asked if there was anything particular I should know. And so I went into the room, and then I stood on this side of the bed because sometimes, if a person's turned one way or the other, they can't see you. You have to be aware now this person had a stroke, and so they might be able to feel on one side and those types of things. So you'd have that bit of kind of conversation, giving it, and here's what I said. And so you kind of give them the verbatim of what you said in a particular case, or what you would have said, and why you would have said it. And you might, at a point like that, bring up the issue of whether or not you offered to say a prayer with the person, whether you mentioned that you were praying for them at church and those kinds of things, or whether or not you might not have done that. Because in your instinct with this person, that might have made them even more nervous about their condition and what have you, and those types of things. And so you'd give illustrations, you'd explain what you'd say or do, as well as what you wouldn't do. And then what I would call, so first I put a name on the show and tell. The second one I say blow by blow. The trainee will explain back to you what he or she saw, and sort of kind of running a scenario in their mind and describing what they kind of saw or heard in your example, and what sense it makes to them and why you might have done it. And they might in fact say, well, why wouldn't you have done this, that, or the other thing? And you might never have thought of that before, and it's a great sign that this person is well tuned into what you're doing and well tuned into the sensitivities around such ministry. And then after that, hopefully things will, you would probably get the student to do, or the trainee to do a dry run, to describe a scenario themselves. Maybe something they had experienced or observed or heard about, seen on a TV show or what have you, and give it describe, and have a chance to have a chat about those things. Then it would shadow you as you do that type of a visit. And then after that, you would let the person take the lead, and you would simply be there to support them, guide them, step in if they needed it, but to observe what we're doing. Following that, then, would be a chance to debrief on it. In your next weekly get together or at the end of the day, to take that particular practice that you've been into for the last while about visitation to the sick, if that was it, and ask, well, what went well in a particular visit, or what seems to be going well when you make those types of visits. What do you find yourself doing different now than when you started out, or what would you do different in a particular visit if you were to make the same visit again, or what have you? It's a way of being positive, giving constructive feedback without kind of asking, well, what you do wrong? How did you screw up? And important in it is that simple sequence of what went well. Always helpful for a trainee to get a sense, because it gives you a chance to affirm and support and to acknowledge that what is going well. And then when you're looking at what would you do different, again, it keeps it on the positive. That rather than focusing what the person might be hesitant on or embarrassed about or discovered he wouldn't do it that way again, it allows you then to acknowledge, yeah, doing it different would be worth trying, and you'd probably have better outcomes, and it keeps it a positive experience for everyone. So that's just a kind of a simple little sketch of 6 or 7 steps that can work with pretty well anything you'd be trying to instruct someone else on. And so I'm just going to take a few moments though to get comments or observations or questions from anyone who might want to have anything to say about that way of offering training and helping people to kind of improve their pastoral skill set.
Hi, Rick. It's Ruby here.
Okay.
One of the experiences that I had when I was a student was I was sent into a situation in a home and not told what was there. And when I came back, the priest was asking me, how did things go, and found it humorous that I was put in a difficult situation without any pre-warning. And so I think, as supervisors, we need to be aware of that, and it's not a game, that we really need to be supporting people. And if we're sending them into a situation that's awkward or difficult, we need to make the student aware of that.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, the forecasting of a particular, difficult situation. Yeah, I mean, it's very inappropriate to do that. And, it's exploitation of everyone, isn't it? It's exploitation of the student to send them into something that's difficult and beyond their competency level. But even more so, it's exploitation and risk to the people that the ministry can be offered to. It can be very embarrassing to everyone if it's not going well. And it's also like a significant aggravation on the credibility of either a parish, the denomination, or pastoral care services in a institution when those types of things happen. But they occasionally do happen. But usually, what happens now, it's kind of not kind of done as a game or kind of negligence, what have you. And there's no doubt that any of us, no matter how much training we have, will come up on things that we've never dreamed we'd find ourselves in the middle of. Yeah. Other comments from anyone online?
Hi, it's Gloria. I think it's important as well to share anything that people might not expect, because sometimes they might have an idea of what things might be like or a response that they might receive. And I think sometimes it's important to share something that they may not expect. I've found myself in that situation, not as a student, but as a priest myself, in getting a reply that I wasn't really expecting. And sometimes it could be positive, but other times it could be a negative experience.
Oh, indeed. And Gloria, thanks for mentioning that, because with the cultural changes that we're experiencing, the demographics, but especially the cultural changes, most clergy with years and years of experience, as well as new clergy and pastoral workers, I say clergy, but it's not only clergy, are coming up against situations and cases that are so different than anything. And a lot of it is that so many of the people that one will be called to minister to, or that one will meet in a pastoral assignment, are people who don't have that kind of long established relationship with the church, that same regard and understanding, appreciation of what ministry is, what pastoral care is. And in many cases, I mean, there are people who are, as the term is often used, unchurched or uncatechized. And regardless of how they are identified in religion, religion-wise and denomination-wise and what have you, their knowledge base and their connection to it is relatively shallow, and so that will often bring you into situations that are way beyond anything that you would have ever been in touch with before. And then there are other changes that are happening, such as now in our nation and in our province, and New Brunswick as well, and everywhere. People have, for instance, medical assistance in dying. That's a whole new set of pastoral skills and a whole new set of personal awareness that one has to work through when you are involved with a patient and a family and expected to continue on that journey with them. And now they are trying to decide whether or not they will have medical assistance with their own death, and how do you minister to that? And there has been, I must say, in most of the denominations, very substantial and helpful guidance provided for people in ministry to, in how to continue to journey without judging, holding to what we regard as dignity of life and what have you, but trying to get that delicate balance, and sometimes it can be very challenging. And the other thing that makes it for some people a bit more challenging these days is kind of the diversity that's there, that comes not only from our culture but also from the initiatives, good initiatives, good progress in terms of more collaborative ventures amongst different healthcare professionals, and also amongst faith groups and denominations. And so, like for instance at the Health Sciences Centre here, before I retired, basically because of shortage of resources, we had brought in a shared chaplaincy for on-call. And it was a wonderful experience, but not without its stress and strain. For instance, when the Salvation Army chaplain would be first call for most of the denominations at the Health Sciences Centre, and so they would get a call and to go to the emergency department, and they go in and they discover it's a Roman Catholic or an Anglican or United Church person. And so then they have to sort out, well, how do I minister to this person now? And what is the extent to which I can minister? And in many cases, they would discover that this person is seriously ill, probably going to die. They appreciate my presence here, but the agreement amongst the denominations is that in such situations, we want to make sure that our own chaplain is available. And it worked very, very well, at least, to that point. And my understanding, it continues and it's growing. And in many ways, I suppose it reflects some of the shifts culture-wise. But those things, back to your point, Gloria, it brings people into new things that they hadn't anticipated having to, as being ways that they would have to minister. For many, they say on the tail end of it that in those challenging times and those challenging occasions, indeed, the Spirit was with them more than the humdrum routine things that you do because you've been doing it so long, you know what you'll do and how to do it. And you face something new and discover, wow, this is really new and life-giving, but challenging too. Other comments from anyone online before we move on?
Yeah, this is Gerald calling. The thing that I noticed is that I haven't been into the ministry that long, but is when you're doing visiting and stuff like that, you have to be very conscious of the family dynamics of the group. If you're with someone in the hospital and there's family members there, you always have to watch out to see or pay attention to the dynamics of the family, because sometimes there's a conflict there sometimes, and you can sense it, and the person that you're trying to pastor to can become uneasy about it, and they are aware. You had to be aware of it too, because you might say something that would start something that you wouldn't want started.
Oh,
Yes.
You're so right.
Yes.
And I think, that's and that's so much part of pastoral ministry, to be aware of the, to be present to families. Why families, there are family dynamics. Of course, I teach on marriage and family. When I give an exam in it, it's a simple exam. I give them a quote that I use in the first class and never mention it again until it's on the exam, and it is the exam. The quote is this: every family is the same in a different way and different in the same way. Comment. So every family has their challenges, and there are dynamics, no matter how different personalities are, the way that people relate to each other. I mean, that's family systems theory. But that's so correct. The other thing I want to tag on to it, Gerald, and it's an important one, is in pastoral ministry, and it's worth dealing with this for trainees. So often you can be asked by somebody else to go to visit their spouse, their parent, their cousin, what have you, and you're being asked to go into something that the person themselves don't need it or want it. And one of the things for people who work in pastoral care, for instance, on pastoral care teams in hospitals, they need to that has to be part of a good discussion amongst the team members, so that many times I would see it come up that someone calls their Roman Catholic priest or their Pentecostal pastor and says, my cousin is in the hospital, or my brother is, would you go to visit him? Well, that person is not on your own list. They might be on anyone's list, or they might be on other, and they don't give you any of that information. Back to Gloria's point about or Ruby's point about, being sent in or asked or invited into something that you're actually not invited into at all by the person who should be doing the inviting. And so those are things that people often discover along the way. We'll see if there's one last comment before we move on to one other little thing before I hand it along to Bill. Okay, if not, I just want to take a few moments on that short article I distributed. It's only a couple of pages, and it's an interesting little article, though. It's from the General Council of the Seventh-day Adventists. They have this little magazine, Ministry. Some of you probably get it. They send it out to everyone and anyone that'll receive it. But it actually usually has some pretty good stuff in it. Well written, often well researched. And the thing that I find interesting in it is that almost always there'll be one or two short things like this where someone who themselves is well educated and trained takes concepts and things from the research and from other professions and brings it into the ministerial context. So I'm not going to go through all of this. Actually, we'll have a bit of other discussion on it. But for right now, I just want to kind of name the headings, and then if anyone has any comments on them, the students who are doing the course for credit will do a bit of work on this particular thing as their first project for the term. So it's called, as it says, 7 Rules for Pastoral Interns. The first paragraphs in it kind of gives the context in which he decided to do that, and acknowledging, some of the challenges that he himself had come up on in his first appointments, and then reflected on it in how people can be trained and what they need to bear in mind themselves, not only what the supervisor will do. And that's why I'm bringing this out today. Earlier on, we had a bit of discussion on kind of step-by-step things to train people in particular pastoral practices. And then when all the pastoral practices are done, it's how do you bring it all together. But this is about, but the intern needs to have some rules in their own mind to guide themselves. And one of the things, first one, you're there to do your job. And he goes on with, first of all, let's get clarified, what is the job? What is my job in being an intern? But it goes usually deeper into what is my job in ministry? And here he lays out a few there on those points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 probably hard to read with the size that it is on your screen, but I've sent it to you as a PDF file. And your job, just to kind of name those things, are love your people. It's your job number one, unconditionally. Love them to a depth that compels you to say, if necessary, I will die for them. John 10. Point them to be both the living word and a written word always, or to point them to both the living word and the written word. Model and encourage the devotional disciplines of Jesus. Walk in the Spirit with integrity. Give hope and rebuke judgmental attitudes and behaviors, and be there for your family, church family, and community. Moves on. He lays out rule number 2. It is up to you to figure things out. And, that is such an important part of preparing to be involved in ministry and effective in ministry, to figuring things out. How do I fit in? What's going on here? Who has authority? How do I relate to others? Those types of things. And I suppose that goes hand in hand with the supervisor making sure that you don't spoon feed so much that the person can shine in their internship, but they shine in their internship because they really didn't have to show their own hesitancy or dependence on the structures and systems. Feedback will not come automatically. Yes, most who are supervisors will set up occasions and ways of getting feedback, but go looking for it as well. Go looking for information on how others think that you could make things better. Attention to detail is extremely important. And some of us by nature are inclined to, okay, so, I have the big picture in my mind, things will fall into place. And when you're kind of the person in charge, sometimes it's easy to do that. You're taking it for granted that there are others who will be the detail people. And there are others who are employed to be and designated to be and delegated to be the detail people. So you're the person in charge, the big picture is the focus. The detail comes further down the line. But for the person in training, every matter that comes along, they need to be thinking, okay, so that's a great idea, but now exactly step by step, how do I make it happen? And what are likely obstacles along the way? Understanding how to fit in the big picture goes a long ways. Understanding how to fit in the big picture goes a long way. Yeah. Not in alone. You're with others, you're on a team, you're part of a faith community, those kinds of things. Companies, is the word he uses, are not obliged to consider your needs and interests. It's important to do that. One of the things I remember in a seminar I was involved with one time on self-care in ministry. Well, one of the presenters there said, it's very easy in this generation to have people latch onto that as that self-care is their ministry. That it becomes all that they are concerned about. So getting that balance. Most people, I think, are genuine, and most people these days use that term balance and appreciate it, and it's where they are. But as I say that, for some people, self-care is their ministry. I bet that few of you have a few people popping to mind right away. Maybe I'm popping into your mind. And last one, no one will care about your career as much as you. And that's an important one as well. You give some explanation there. And it's one of the things that, when the rubber hits the road, I find, talking to our students here, and sometimes, they're anxious to share their position, their thoughts, and their ideas on things. And as students sometimes can be really eager to make a mark. But I remind them, don't be too anxious to create a profile for yourself or to get yourself a reputation for being one way or another. You know, it's a long road. Many of the people who are in ministry, people who are in congregations, they are the way they are for a good reason. So don't be too anxious to create a big profile of yourself, because you might regret it. Once it's there, it's there for a long time. And so you know, you need to manage who and what you are, and how you present yourself in light of you know, a career, if you're planning to be a professional in ministry or to have a lifetime in pastoring. So that's that article. A bit interesting, I thought. Interesting in its content, interesting in its source as well. So I mentioned to you again, if you go online and you look for it, I'm sure that they'd be glad to send it to you, and tens of thousands of other things as well. So up to yourself there. But anyway, I think what we're going to do now is improve it all by passing the line to Bill, because he's here today to do some reflection with us, and Bill will be with us next time as well. Thanks, Bill, for doing that. As I mentioned earlier, and even before you came, Bill, we've been involved with us in pastoral care for a long time. So this really enriches our program today. And I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag that we're actually in a discussions now with the United Church of Canada, who are interested in working with us here at Queen's College, at least, you know, United Church of Canada in Newfoundland, to do some work around training for supervision for trainees in ministry. So great to have you with us, Bill, and for our relationship with the United Church as well. So I'm going to let you come here because I'll be able to see you clearer. And did you plan to use slides, or you?
No,
okay,
not today.
Okay, so for those who are online, we'll just leave that screen there, the one that is on, and again, it will be the Reverend Bill Bartlett who will be doing the speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for the invitation to be part of this particular course and to look at the action reflection model. My relationship with Queen's College goes back a long ways, thinking about action and reflecting on that. 1967, I started at Memorial University and stayed at Field Hall when it was just opened. So it's been a good relationship, a very productive relationship over the years. And then to jump ahead in connection with clinical pastoral education and again, the action reflection model, it was through Queen's College when I started introducing CPE here in St. John's that we set up a formal relationship with Queen's to have the courses go through the college here. So I think it's a really important piece to for each of us to reflect on how we were trained in ministry ourselves. And it's a real privilege to be a supervisor for any students that we have. And I invite you to think about your own experience in ministry, whether it's a lay ministry or an ordained ministry vocation. What kinds of supervision have you experienced yourself? And I want to name some of my own experience starting off in ministry. The very first place I was sent to as a student minister, I was named that I had a supervisor for that ministry. I get there, I telephoned the supervisor to let that person know I was there. And that was the one and only conversation I had for the whole summer. Never did see the person. There was never any relationship with the person whatsoever. And that was my first experience as a teenager in ministry and having to do ministry with all of its aspects. So that was my first experience. The next summer, going back to the same place actually, but different supervisor. Again, contacted the person who was the supervisor, and the only thing arranged for the whole summer was that we switched one time the person to come in to do the sacraments, and I would go and take over the service for that person. Only piece of supervision. And then I went out to northern Saskatchewan and experienced a much more helpful model of supervision. There happened to be 3 students in this particular part of the northern part of the province, and the supervisor was there to meet us when we arrived, and every week had a time set aside for us to gather with him as a group, the three student ministers, and we would do that every single week. We would have a morning together where we would reflect on the ministry. We would do some naming of what was happening in connection with worship and pastoral visits and anything that was happening. And as a group, we sat down and discussed that. And I lift that up because I think there's real value in having a group of people to be able to discuss things. And then after we would have some time together reflecting on our ministry, we would play together. We would have fun together. We would always have some kind of activity that we would do to have fun. And you can learn an awful lot about ourselves in ministry when we have some fun together. And so that was a very positive experience. And it really set me on a course in connection with trying to learn more about supervision and doing some formal things around supervision from that experience. Well, the next year I get sent back to Newfoundland again and tried to contact the supervisor who wasn't there. Person was supposed to help with arranging some place to stay. Person wasn't there. So I ended up going to an isolated community and walking around the community until I found some place for me to lay my head and stay for the summer. The bottom line again, there for 3 months and never did see the supervisor. So that's early on in ministry. Those were the 4 experiences I had, and 3 really with actually no supervision. Fortunately, I had experienced the one where it was very helpful supervision. So I named that just by way of introducing how important it is, what an important ministry entrusted to us when we supervise people who are training in ministry, students who are with us, and why we need to take it very seriously.
And I think also it verifies the benefit of having something like this, an opportunity to get a bit of training and insight to it, because in ministry and in every career and profession, people will avoid doing the things that they're not comfortable with.
Right.
So somebody asked to give supervision without being provided with any training, and at that time it was unlikely that these people who were asked to supervise, In fact, you probably came away better off in the long run by having nothing to do with it than them trying to supervise without knowing what it is that they should be doing it.
And you name a very important piece here. I don't think people were given training. They were given the assignment on paper, but no training to do it.
Yeah.
And this is going back to the late 60s and early 70s. So we've come a long ways.
Well, so often ministry was then, through the isolation, the lack of contact, that was even possible, even phone in some instances was so expensive that you were just plunked down and in effect told cope. Cope.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you didn't cope, that was a big sign of weakness.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right.
Though it was no fault of the individual. And that's where, through technology that we've got now, there are so many further opportunities to guard against that not happening ever again.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I think this institution is seeking to do, and to bring more people together and to have an even greater cross section of input.
Yeah.
So I wonder, in connection with people online, do you have any reflection on your own experience of models of experience with supervision and how it has worked for you? Did anybody run into experiences like I did? Or has it been much more structured and positive?
Hi, this is Kay. My experience is only a couple of years ago, and it was a very rewarding 3 months, and it shaped a lot of my ministry, and I can't imagine going into a supervision role placement as a student and not having some guidance and some leadership. And the structure that Queen's program provided was essential, in that we did have weekly meetings and we did have a peer support group, and all of these things worked. And I think a lot of it worked because of the differences in the people who were placed in the groups. My peer support group was a female who had recently become a widow and needed some support herself, a young gentleman, and then somebody who was from another faith and had come to the Anglican faith. So it was a wide diversity, and there was obviously a lot of thought given to it by my supervisor, and the conversations that sprung out of the dynamics of that group, as well as the supervisor himself, were life-changing for me in my role as ministry, I think, and I really place a lot of value on what I learned in those 3 months from practical experience and through conversations. So I can't imagine going in and being given a list and thrown in and no supervision.
This is Gerald. I was one of the students that when Queen's closed, I was there for 1 year, and then Bishop David gave me a parish in Gander Bay, where I am to right now. I didn't go through an internship program or anything like that. All I had was CPE from Colleen Lassmer in Cambridge, and with some help and guidance with the people around me, it went well. But still, I wish I had that 3 month supervision where I could have been with someone and guided through it. And I started late in ministry, so.
It makes a big difference if you, in fact, have that process set up.
I too went the program, the 3 months that was, of course, structured by Queen's College, and I was in a different part of the province of Newfoundland that I had never been in before, and it was a great learning experience. My support team, my supervisor, I still, I think, am learning from things from that experience, because some ideas of my supervisor's ministry and mine were a little different, and I did reflect on that with my professor at Queen's, and it was a wonderful learning experience, very, very positive, and the structure that Queen's had set out, I think, was definitely an excellent structure.
Good, thank you. So in connection with the action...
Neil here in Fortune. Actually, it's coming up as Beverly, but it's actually Neil today. I guess I've been on both ends of the spectrum as a supervisor and a supervisee, and each of them come with their different challenges, but at the end of the day, I think it was all rewarding, because as a supervisee with Tom Moulton a few years back, I guess it molded me into a fashion of ministry and different ideas when I went out. And then as being a supervisor, I guess even what I learned in St. John's with Reverend Moulton, you could pass on those aspects to the one that I was supervising last semester or last fall. So in some respects, I guess the tradition of supervision, when it's done properly, continues to flow down the line of prospective clergy that are continuing to come out. I never experienced, I guess what I would say you did, be able to sink or swim when you were sent out, and I'm grateful for that. Two experiences, from my perspective, two of them were good. What the future holds in that respect, no one knows, but positive in both cases.
Good, thank you. So in connection with the action reflection model itself, that's based on looking at any piece of ministry in connection with the CPE model. One point there, that last article, Rick, it talked about paying attention to detail. And that's one of the things that when we use verbatims, and when we use verbatims in connection with supervision, and I suspect it may be used some in supervision of ministry students.
Yeah, it's one of the our manual has we offer a set of tools there that and then in the meetings with the supervisors, encourage them that if you find that the meetings with the individual student are not making progress in getting to deeper layers,
right, then
there are different things that can be used, case role playing, case studies, and verbatims. So there's a few of the things that are not only listed but described and tools put there. But for the sake of those who probably aren't familiar with verbatim, so I expect most are, but it'd be worthwhile to give a description of what it would be, and then right, because I think a lot learned from doing a verbatim, just their own writing.
Yeah, the verbatim itself would be you would do a visit, and it's actually capturing what happened in that visit itself, including the preparation you might do before you would do the visit, but when you are in that visit, to capture the conversation, but also capturing in connection with paying attention to detail. What kinds of cards or lack of cards might be in the room? What pictures might the person have there? when you're talking about how to, if the person's on one side or another in connection with the stroke. So you actually are using what's in front of you to inform your understanding of the person and what might be important in their life or not. So you name that. When you do the verbatim, you also name what you're actually seeing, and then you do some reflection on the visit itself, and the supervisor will do some reflecting with you. It also helps you to train your ability to remember what went on in that visit for follow-up visits. So it's taking a moment in time and doing a reflection on it. Then if you have the luxury of having a group, when I mentioned the 3 people who were in that group in northern Saskatchewan, when you have a group of people to be able to actually sometimes role play that visit that even makes it richer in connection with your learning from the verbatim itself. So any of you have experience using verbatims in your pastoral practice or supervision?
Yes, this is Gerald. In my CPE, I did a lot of verbatims with Dr. Colleen Lassner, and I found them very beneficial. I really enjoyed doing them because it makes you aware of your surroundings when you go into a hospital room.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
Hi, it's Ruby here. I used mine a lot as well in CPE and my supervised field education, and also when I did my theses at the end of my term in my master's. But in the master's, of course, you're recording your conversations and then typing them up, and it's amazing what you actually forget you said.
And the things that others said that you didn't notice that they had said, that's what I find in those types of activities.
Yeah. So it's one of the tools that we use for the action reflection piece is the verbatim itself, and some of the other pieces is in relation to doing case studies. And that's one of the things for the next time around. I think we'll actually look at a couple of case studies, maybe send them out ahead of time. So that we can do some learning. Through a case study itself.
Yeah, that'll be a good idea.
To do that. So it's a method of education where we, in fact, are using our own life story and the life story of others to do ministry. One of the other things about the action reflection model is, and I found this all through supervision, if we enter into it in good faith, we, in fact, as supervisors, learn as much about ourselves and our ministry as the people that we are training and supervising. It's, and I've always found that every time. And that's true supervision. Then when you're open and vulnerable and able to know that you learn yourself. From that.
It also underlines, I think, the fact that when one is privileged to be in a supervisor's role, the supervisee is not another pair of hands and eyes to do the work.
Right.
As a supervisor, you will be working a lot harder than you normally do.
Oh,
That's right.
That's the bit that I think, and that's where we grow
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Because everyone is so different
Yeah.
that we get
Yeah.
to supervise.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is a privilege.
It is.
I
It is.
believe it's a privilege to be entrusted with that ministry. And if we see it as ministry, the supervision that we are involved in, we'll put our heart and soul in it, in doing that.
Mm.
You know. So it's a really important piece that we're involved in.
And your verbatim also sharpens something that's extraordinarily important in pastoral ministry and everything else. It sharpens the skill for observation,
Yes.
especially to detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's
as much
I
you want.
I just kind of want to introduce
Okay.
today.
Yeah.
You know, we will go with this. It's a really important piece in the learning, and we'll look at some case studies the next time.
Next time. So you'll prepare them and get them to me, and I'll get them out.
Get them out, yeah.
Okay. And then we'll you and I can chat about how you want to go about doing them and get the engagement. We will encourage attendees to have read the case to participate in the case study and what have you. Yeah. But it is the taking the time to ponder, to review, examine, reflect that brings the richness to that part of the learning. Bill, I'm just going to, you can stay where you are,
Okay.
because we're pretty well on the end of what we're doing. Normally we go for about 2 hours, but this is a good start to the semester. So today I just want to also bring us back to the prayer that we started with from this little text. If you want to grab something that will be a bit inspiring for you, it's called Abide, Keeping Vigil with the Word of God by Macrina Whitaker, Benedictine sister. But the prayer that I extracted from it, because it speaks to what I think so much of this is about, and as I was preparing for this class, what came to my mind is that aspect of the pastoral skills, the pastoral gifts that people have. So often those gifts are given and used in the ministries themselves, but being able to train others in it, passing on your knowledge, training others, that's a whole different aspect of giving the gift, using the gift. And so that's why I kind of thought her prayer was appropriate to the moment. So let's finish with it. O gift-giving God, this I know to be true. All is gift. In your hands you hold age-old gifts that continue to flow into my life. Each gift bears the image of the giver. And I reach for these gifts. Instill in me an awareness of the love with which you give. Inspire me to share with others the treasures you have poured into my life. For only then will your gift be a gift when given away. Teach me how to give and how to give away, how to receive and how to surrender. Reveal in me both my icons and my idols. May I learn to live with open hands and open heart. I'll just comment that beautiful writer, awesome. But that line there revealed to me both my icons and my idols. That's the type of stuff that in her writings, and then she brings them together in prayers. Wow, you know, the poetry of it is powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's part of what the action reflection
That's
model
what
is
they
about,
actually,
isn't
it really is.
It's stumbling onto the idols.
Yeah. And it's interesting that particular author I was introduced to by a student, a CPE student, in a unit of CPE in Clarenville back in about 2000. And at the end of the unit, he gave me one of her books, and it's become a gift to me. I've gone back to it and have purchased a number of her other books over time. But it was through this student who is no longer with us. He died a few years after with cancer. But John introduced me to Nicolina.
Yeah.
And beautiful writer.
Yeah.
Beautiful gift.
Oh, you did. Yeah. Right. So that's it for today, folks. We look forward to our next class in a few weeks, early in February. Tried to arrange it so we wouldn't have too much clash with Lenten activities and what have you. Any questions, comments, anything to say before we wrap up? If there aren't, then we're done for today. For those who are online, good luck, and we hope you can join us at the class next time, as we'll be doing the case studies. But in the meantime, it's if what's convenient for you is doing it online, great that you are availing of it that way as well. Best of luck to you all. Bye bye.
Thank you.